If you came here for a hero, you opened the wrong story. I wasn't brave. I wasn't wise. I was just a man who kept choosing the gentlest explanation because the truth felt too sharp to hold. We met at a pop-up market where people sell candles that smell like memories. She was working a booth for a friend, which I later learned meant for herself, but it sounds humbler this way. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Don't waste my time." I laughed because I thought it was flirtation. It turned out to be policy. From the first week, she set rules without calling them rules. Call me after 9, before that I'm in flow. Never text K. It reads like contempt. If you're late, bring a pastry. Croissant means sorry. Almond means very sorry. She made boundaries sound like aesthetics, and I told myself she was just particular. Particular is cute until it becomes control, with lipstick on. She was magnetic in public. Sharp, funny, that effortless way of owning the room without looking like she tried. People adored her. She'd put a hand on the small of my back when I spoke, like I was a well-trained quote she could insert wherever the story needed warmth. Friends said, "You're lucky." I believe them. Luck, I've learned, can look a lot like training. Private was different. Private had grading rubrics. If I told a story, she corrected the details to make it stream better. If I cooked, she rescued the pan mid-stir and said, "You almost had it." If I vented about work, she said, "Listen to your verbs, you're hiding." She turned my days into drafts and herself into an editor with Final Cut. I started editing myself before she could. Money came wrapped in jokes. She'd say, "Your card has better manners," pushing the check toward me with one painted nail. I didn't mind paying, until paying bled into investing in her projects, a ring light, a workshop, a collab trip with a photographer who only shot oceans. When I hesitated once, she smiled like a teacher and said, "Small men count, big men build." I swiped because I wanted to be big. It took me months to realize that in her dictionary, big meant useful. She had a talent for weaponizing vulnerability. On Monday, she'd tell the story of her awful ex who kept score. On Tuesday, she'd bring up his name in the middle of our dinner for context. On Wednesday, she'd accuse me of being controlling if I flinched. It was like being asked to hold a glass, and then being blamed when it shattered in your hands. "See," she'd say kindly, "you gripped too hard." I noticed her tests before I had language for them. 3 days silences to reset. Compliments that bent into insults at the end. You're dependable, sometimes painfully. You're calm, verging on passive. She adored me for the same traits she punished. It kept me guessing. Guessing kept me close. And God, the performance. Everything was content. After an argument, she'd post a black screen with healing and a broken heart, then curl against me on the couch like she hadn't just hired a crowd to witness a scene I wasn't finished acting in. She'd film our hands and caption it, "Safe," on days I felt anything but. She'd cry just enough to glisten, then whisper, "Don't share my tears," after sharing them with 5,000 strangers. I learned that privacy isn't the absence of cameras. It's whether the person next to you treats your life like it belongs to you. There were bright parts, and they were blinding. She could be wildly kind. Show up with soup when I was sick, fix my broken cabinet with a screwdriver between her teeth, text me a photo of a book I'd mentioned once in passing and say, "I listen." Those moments were real, and that made everything harder. Cruelty disguised as chaos is easy to spot. Care spliced with control feels like love if you zoom in close enough. Nothing blatantly wrong happened at first, just small, tilted things. A second phone charger by her bed for guests. A playlist on her account named Midnights. That wasn't her taste. A coffee receipt from across town at hours. She swore she was home. Each one had a clean explanation. Each explanation landed just soft enough to make me feel like a suspicious man failing a decent woman. She introduced me to a new ritual, the apology jar. "We don't stew," she said. "We name and drop it. If one of us messed up, we'd write it on a slip of paper and put it in a mason jar to close the loop." It was cute until the slips multiplied, mostly my handwriting. Sorry for tone. Sorry for being late. Sorry for asking twice. One night I wrote, "Sorry for not knowing what I'm apologizing for," and folded it small enough to hide it under the lid. My best friend said, "You sound quieter," and I said, "We're just growing." He tilted his head like he was trying to hear something I'd stopped saying. The first real rupture came disguised as a date night. She suggested a digital detox dinner. Phones in a dish, eyes on each other. It was nice for a while. We told childhood stories, the kind that still have grass stains on them. Halfway through, a server came over and said, "Are you?" and said her full name with that tone that means they follow you. She lit up, took the compliment, then asked the server to take a photo for memories. The phone slid out of the dish like a trained bird. She posted it before dessert. "You broke the rule," I said, half teasing. "I didn't," she said. "I said it." That was the whole relationship in 4 words. I started keeping a quiet ledger, not to trap her, but to trap myself when I tried to rewrite the past later. A note for the night she reset after we'd planned to meet. A screenshot of a caption that contradicted what she told me. A timestamp from a rideshare that ended 2 blocks from the bar. She said she hated the vibe of... I didn't confront her with any of it. I just stared at my own list and asked why a man in love needs proof he's not crazy. She had a creative partner she spoke about with reverence. I met him once. Kind eyes, soft handshake. The sort of person who makes you forgive the room. She praised him in a way that felt almost religious. He gets it. He holds space. He does the work. When I joked, "Should I be jealous?" she smiled and said, "Jealousy is cheap," which sounds enlightened until you realize it's also a great way to dismiss a boundary you don't want to respect. If you're waiting for the smoking gun, it's not here yet. What I had redrafted a story I didn't want to finish. A hotel key sleeve wedged in the pocket of her coat from an event. A second toothbrush she swore was her cousin's because she forgets everything. A scent on her collar that wasn't mine and wasn't quite hers. Each clue was explainable. The sum of them wasn't. Still I stayed. Not because I didn't see. Because seeing meant saying, and saying meant losing the version of us I was killing myself to keep. I told myself love is work. I forgot that work isn't supposed to erase you. Here's the honest place where chat 1 ends, with me seated at her kitchen counter, watching steam rise from a pot while she hums a playlist I've never heard, telling myself that if I just hold steady, the floor will stop shifting. I didn't know the ending. I didn't know the worst part yet. I only knew that the woman beside me could make me feel chosen and small in the same breath, and that I was still waiting for a kind of safety she only performed when there was an audience. If you want a preview of what comes next, the jar fills, the ledger darkens, the partner becomes a schedule, and the truth doesn't arrive with confession. It arrives with the sound of my own voice finally asking the question I've been dodging. Who am I becoming, loving you like this? If you're waiting for the smoking gun, it's not here yet. What I had were drafts of a story I didn't want to finish. A hotel key sleeve wedged in the pocket of her coat from an event. A second toothbrush she swore was her cousin's because she forgets everything. A scent on her collar that wasn't mine and wasn't quite hers. Each clue was explainable. The sum of them wasn't. Still I stayed. Not because I didn't see. Because seeing meant saying, and saying meant losing the version of us I was killing myself to keep. I told myself love is work. I forgot that work isn't supposed to erase you. Here's the honest place where chat 1 ends, with me seated at her kitchen counter, watching steam rise from a pot while she hums a playlist I've never heard, telling myself that if I just hold steady, the floor will stop shifting. I didn't know the ending. I didn't know the worst part yet. I only knew that the woman beside me could make me feel chosen and small in the same breath, and that I was still waiting for a kind of safety she only performed when there was an audience. If you want to preview what comes next, the jar fills, the ledger darkens, the partner becomes a schedule, and the truth doesn't arrive with confession. It arrives with the sound of my own voice finally asking the question I've been dodging. Who am I becoming, loving you like this? I kept telling myself that if I named things gently enough, they would hurt less. So I kept the ledger and I kept the jar, and I kept the peace, and each of those kept me smaller. The creative partner graduated from anecdote to calendar entry. At first, it was little things, quick brainstorm, lighting test, notes pass. Then the blocks got longer. Run through, pitch deck, overnight render. She'd screenshot her week and send it with heart emojis like proof of ambition. I wanted to be proud without feeling replaced, the way a good man in a tidy story would be. Pride came easy on text. It came harder when her chair sat empty next to me for the fourth evening in a row. The jar filled, and not with hers. Sorry for tone. Sorry for being reactive. Sorry for asking twice. Sorry for not being fun. She turned the glass every few days like a plant toward light. See, she'd say, we metabolize. I'd nod, as if the metabolism wasn't mostly mine. Once I wrote, sorry for apologizing to avoid arguments, and tucked it under the lid. A week later I looked and it was gone. I asked if she'd read it. She smiled. We don't archive pity, she said, like she'd taught me something. She invited me to a shoot, said it would reset my brain to see how hard she worked. I came with snacks and patience. The set was a rented loft with good bones and terrible acoustics. Everyone moving with that purposeful chaos that makes you feel lazy for breathing at the wrong tempo. She was in her element, crisp and kind, slicing time into tasks and touching shoulders in passing to make encouragement look effortless. The partner was there, of course, hands gentle on equipment, voice low with solutions. They were so fluent in each other that I felt like a tourist reading a menu in the wrong language. When she introduced me, he said, "You must be the anchor." And it sounded like a compliment until I realized anchors are most useful when everyone else wants to move. We wrap late. She glowed. I lugged a light case to be helpful and nearly fell down the last 3 stairs because the handle slipped. She laughed, reached for my arm, and said, "You try so hard," in a tone I couldn't parse. In the ride home, she fell asleep, mouth slightly open, the kind of exhaustion that proves you were necessary to something. I watched streetlights pass like sentences I couldn't finish and practiced not asking the questions that would make me the villain in the story she would tell later. The ledger kept growing. I didn't want it to. It embarrassed me to need it. But lies, even the small, polite ones, do something odd at time. They make yesterday blurry and tomorrow conditional. The ledger was my petty little lighthouse. Tuesday, hold from 2 to 5, location pin a boutique hotel lobby. Thursday, reset, posted a black square with a caption, choosing soft. Saturday, girls' night. But the third glass on the table in the boomerang wasn't a girl's glass, and I hated myself for noticing the weight of a man's wrist. When I did ask, I asked sideways, "Do you ever feel like you're living faster than me?" She kissed my forehead. "I'm trying to pull you forward." "Where?" I said. She laughed. "Into your bigness." It sounded generous, and also like I was a project. I told her I didn't want to be big. I wanted to be honest. She said, "Honesty without vision is just complaining." And stacked plates like that settled it. My friend staged a small rescue disguised as a birthday. They rented a cabin and told me I had no choice. No cameras, no quick content, no plus ones. I went because loyalty is easier with people who don't ask you to prove it. We cooked badly, played cards like we were terrible at math, walked a loop around a lake that looked like a screensaver. The third night, after beer and a fire that refused to die politely, my closest friend said, "You think she loves you or the version of you that costs her least?" I wanted to be angry. Instead, I felt relief. A sentence with edges. Finally. Back home, I tried to negotiate a middle that didn't exist. Can we pick 2 nights a week that are ours and actually keep them? She smiled, then winced, then performed the smile again correctly. Structure kills magic, she said. It doesn't have to, I said. For me it does, she said, and kissed me like an apology I wasn't allowed to accept. 2 things happened in the same week that scraped me down to truth. First, my mother landed in the hospital for a not serious but scary thing. I texted from the ER, "Staying overnight with Mom. Machines beeping like a techno club from 2009. She replied 4 hours later with a heart and breathe. That's it. The partner, who had somehow gotten my number from a group chat related to a past event, texted, "Hey, I heard. Anything you need carried or covered?" I stared at that message a long time because the wrong person was offering the right thing. I told him I was fine because I didn't know the etiquette for accepting decency from a man who might be undoing me. Second, she invited me to a tiny screening of a short they'd made. 10 people in a room with folding chairs, warm beer in a cooler, a projector that hummed like a complaint. The film was good, better than good. It was tender and specific, and it looked like both of them. During Q&A, a woman asked about chemistry on set, and someone behind me whispered, "Obvious," with the mean joy of people who found a pattern before you did. She laughed at the question, put a hand on his shoulder, said something like, "Trust creates art," and the room nodded as if she'd said a new thing. After, a man I'd never met told me I was brave, in a tone that meant something else. She squeezed my hand too tightly and said, "Don't make faces," even though I wasn't. On the way out, the partner walked a pace behind us, then ahead, then disappeared to take a call that ended right as we reached the door. They moved like magnets, taking turns being the north. The toothpaste conversation happened in my kitchen, of all places. She brushed before bed using my sink, my mirror, my cheap cup, and said through phone, "We should buy the sensitive kind. This one's too harsh." I said, "Okay." She rinsed, wiped her mouth with the towel I use for hands, and said, "See? Easy." I heard 5 words she didn't say. When I tell you what a change it. I put a new tube in the cabinet the next day. Sensitive, mint, agreed-upon brand. The following week, I took out the bathroom trash and saw 2 empty travel-sized tubes of a brand I'd never seen, crumpled and hidden under tissues. Nothing illegal, nothing movie-worthy, just evidence of a parallel preference that had never been brought to me. I laughed one short, ugly sound that sounded like a leak, and threw them away like they were ordinary, because they were. That was the point. The ordinary things kill you slowly while you search for the gun. The first and only time I opened her phone was an accident born of muscle memory. Her device was on my counter, face up, unlocked because she just used a timer for pasta. A banner slid down with a message preview. I miss talking like this. No name, just a dot and a heart. My thumb twitched. Then I stepped back like it was a hot stove. I called her name from the other room and asked if she wanted pepper in the sauce. She said yes like nothing in the world was on fire. That night, lying beside a woman who slept like innocence, I realized I crossed a line without touching anything. I had become a man who polices himself more than he protects himself. I was proud of not snooping, like restraint was a medal, and also ashamed of needing a medal for not saving my own life. The day I rehearsed a confrontation, I practiced failing at it first. Are you seeing him? Too blunt. Are you sleeping with him? Too crude. Do you love him? Too generous. I practiced my eyes, angry, calm, forgiving, businesslike. I practice my jaw, because apparently I care about how a jaw looks while life breaks. I practice hearing every version of her answer and choosing not to scream. I practice breathing. That part helped. I didn't do it that day. I did something worse. I invited her to my brother's place to help move a couch. She came in leggings and the sweatshirt she steals and the voice she uses for strangers she might need later. She made 3 jokes that got my sister-in-law to laugh, and 1 comment that made my brother raise an eyebrow at me behind her back. After we finished, we sat on the floor eating pizza off a box like broke teenagers. She leaned on my shoulder and said, "See? We're good." If you've never heard those words used as a lid on a boiling pot, you might confuse them for comfort. On the ride home, I finally said a true sentence without decoration. I'm losing myself. It felt like dropping something heavy I'd been carrying around. She didn't miss a beat. "Maybe that's good," she said. The old self was too small. I wanted to ask who gets to measure me. I wanted to ask why changing for love feels like shrinking when people write songs about how it makes you larger. I wanted to ask why the only parts of me that grew in this story were the ones that could hold more of her. 2 days later, the ledger got its ugliest entry. Hotel midweek, my city, 3 p.m., the sleeve from that brand again, in our trash under coffee grounds. I hadn't been near a hotel. She hadn't mentioned an event. I stood there with a banana peel in one hand and a piece of cardboard in the other, and for a second I saw myself the way a stranger would, pathetic detective of his own home, chasing dignity through recycling. I put it in the drawer where the first sleeve slept and closed it like a mouth. That night, she was sweetness turned up to 11. She made dinner inedible, burned a candle I hated expensive, and climbed into my lap like gravity wanted us together. She said, "Name something you want that you're afraid to say." I said, "For you to pick a day and keep it." She said, "That's not a want, that's a rule," and kissed me to change the subject. I don't have the blow up for you. I don't have the scream. What I have is the image of her leaving my place the next morning, late for something that didn't have a name, and me calling after her, "Be safe," like a man praying to a God who hates specificity. The door shut. I poured coffee. I looked at the drawer. I didn't open it. I put my hands on the counter and counted to 60, then 60 again, until the counting wasn't about time anymore, just proof that I was still here. That day at work, my boss asked if I wanted to lead a new project. For the first time in months, I said yes without hearing her voice in my head directing the optics. I stayed late on purpose, not as a test, just because it felt good to be useful in a world that didn't ask me to apologize for my verbs. When I walked home, the city looked regular. Couples argued about nothing in doorways. A bus driver laughed with a cyclist. A kid dropped a cone and didn't cry. Ordinary life kept happening like it had never met me. And then, near my building, I saw them, her and the partner, half a block ahead, walking close but not touching, the kind of distance that means someone already knows what their hand feels like. I don't think they saw me. He said something. She whipped her head back in that specific laugh she saves for when she's delighted by herself. He reached up without thinking and smoothed a strand of hair behind her ear. It took less than a second. It took the air out of my ribs. They turned into a door I didn't know opened and vanished. I stood there with a grocery bag full of ingredients. I no longer felt like cooking and understood that a man can survive not knowing, right up until he knows in a way no sentence can undo. I didn't run. I didn't call. I went upstairs. I put the bag on the counter. I opened the drawer and took out both sleeves. I placed them side by side like a before and after no one asked for. I wrote one line in the ledger. I see it. Then I closed the book because there was nothing left to chronicle except my own decision. If you're waiting for me to confront her now, you'll have to wait with me. I wasn't brave that night. I made pasta I didn't want and ate 2 bites. I sat in my chair and watched the room get dark around its edges. I turned my phone face down and let it buzz like a housefly until it stopped. I slept badly. In the morning, the city was still the city. I made coffee. I didn't check her stories. I put on a clean shirt and looked myself in the mirror long enough to recognize the man looking back. Then I walked out the door with a quiet knowledge that the next time I saw her, I wouldn't be asking for proof. I'd be choosing whether I wanted a life that required it. I didn't need more clues, but they kept falling into my hands like loose change you never wanted to carry. A coffee receipt from across town on a morning. She swore she worked from home. A second wine glass left rinsed but not washed in her sink when I dropped by unannounced. A playlist she swore she'd made for me, but every lyric felt like it was written for someone else. None of it screamed. It all whispered, and whispers are worse. You can pretend not to hear them until they're louder than your own thoughts. I kept telling myself, don't accuse, don't ruin what might still be okay. So I stored every detail in a ledger I swore I'd never need. Dates times small oddities. I wasn't building a case against her. I was building a shield for myself. So when the truth finally landed, I couldn't gaslight myself into thinking I hadn't seen it coming. One night, she showed up late with takeout. She dropped her bag on the couch and kissed me like she hadn't been missing for 4 hours. Her phone lit up on the armrest. A message preview, just a heart and the words, still thinking of last night. I froze. She saw me looking, smiled, and flipped the phone face down. "Client are dramatic," she said and laughed. The way she said it almost made me believe her. Almost. The worst part was how good she still was at loving me in between. She curled into me on the couch, asked me to tell her something true no one else knew, and listened like my voice was the only sound she cared about. I told her about the time I almost quit college because I felt invisible. She kissed my knuckles and said, "You're never invisible to me." And I believed her, even as my chest burned with the message I'd just seen. That's the sickness of it. Betrayal mixed with tenderness is harder to walk away from than cruelty. My friends noticed before I let myself. One of them asked why I always looked like I was rehearsing an answer when people asked how I was. Another joked that I'd become her assistant with benefits. I laughed too loud, too fake, and changed the subject. Because saying it out loud would mean naming the thing I wasn't ready to face. I started living in 2 realities. In one, we were still us, laughing in the kitchen, holding hands in cabs, taking pictures that made strangers jealous. In the other, I was a detective in my own life, tracing patterns of absences, smells, and timestamps. Both felt real, and that's what kept me trapped. I didn't confront her. Not yet, because I knew the second I asked, it would all collapse. And maybe I wasn't scared of her answer. Maybe I was scared of hearing my own voice demand it. So I kept quiet, held her tighter when she let me, and kept collecting pieces of a puzzle I already understood, but couldn't finish. That's where I was. A man split in 2. One side desperate to believe the softness was real, the other cataloging evidence that it wasn't. Both sides in love, both sides exhausted, both sides waiting for the storm I knew was already here. I didn't get a clean confession. I didn't even get a fight. What I got was a pattern too sharp to ignore anymore. She was always busy, always running late, always resetting. That was normal by then. But one night, walking home earlier than usual, I saw her across the street with him, the so-called partner. They weren't holding hands, not touching at all, but their pace told the story. The way she turned her head, the way he leaned closer to listen, the little bubble of silence they carried with them. You don't need a kiss to understand what you're looking at. I froze, half a block away, pretend to check my phone while every part of me screamed. I wanted to cross, to shout, to demand. Instead, I stayed still. I watched them disappear into a doorway I didn't know she had keys to. Later, she called me cheerful, said she was exhausted from brainstorming. I said nothing. I let her voice fill the silence like nothing had happened, because asking would make it real, and real meant everything we had left would collapse in one breath. That's where I was, a man who already knew, but still chose not to say it out loud, because the second I did, there'd be no going back. I didn't need proof anymore. I needed an exit I could live with. The next morning, I packed her things into a plain bag, scarf, charger, the book she never finished, a photo strip I didn't look at. I left it with the doorman and sent one message. Your things are downstairs, 10 to 6. Take care. No speech. No trapdoors for an argument. She called. I let it ring. Then the text came. Can we talk? You're overreacting. You're cruel. Please. I put my phone face down and made coffee I finally drank hot. Quiet isn't forgiveness, but it's the first thing that felt like mine. I told two friends a whole story without softening it. Saying it out loud snapped a spell. I wasn't crazy. I was just done. I blocked her number, deleted the ledger, and threw away the key card sleeves I kept like relics from a religion I didn't believe in anymore. There was no final confession, no scene on a sidewalk, just me choosing a truth I couldn't unknow and a life that didn't require me to pretend. I walked home that night, past the hotel without looking up, and felt the strangest thing, relief with grief inside it, like a storm finally moving off but leaving the air clean. I didn't win. I just stopped losing myself. That's my ending. Not a verdict, not revenge, just a door I closed without slamming, and a morning that started without her voice deciding who I was.